We hear the word inflation used a lot in the news and when we are dealing with the finance side of our life. Something we have heard a lot about but might not exactly know what it is. So what is inflation and how does it affect you? In basic terms, inflation is the price increase seen on items and services we buy over a period of time. The broadest measure of inflation is using a tool called the Consumer Price Index, which is made up of a basket of goods such as food you buy and services such as haircuts or travel. The increase in prices in this index shows the level of current inflation. Inflation can also be defined by other means, and that is the loss of value of your money, commonly known as the loss of purchasing power of a currency. An example of this could be a takeout coffee that in the year 2000 could have cost you £1.80 and today costs you £2.80. This coffee now requires more of your money for the same thing. Essentially, the value of money has become weaker. Inflation is normally always presented as a percentage, and this is important as we will see later when comparing it to other financial terms such as interest rate. Now we have a basic understanding of inflation, we should now explain how it changes and it can be controlled. Inflation naturally occurs when we have a situation where demand outstrips supply. Put simply, if more people want to buy a certain item than is available, the person selling that item would be able to raise the price of that item. This is the fundamentals of supply and demand when spoken about in regards to an economy. So, if prices can change through supply and demand, is there a way to control supply and demand, in turn controlling inflation? Yes, and that is one of the main roles of a country's central bank. A central bank, such as the Bank of England in the United Kingdom, is able to influence inflation by changing the interest rate within a country. Changing an interest rate means that the cost of borrowing money can be controlled, from making it more or less expensive to take out loans or credit card debt. Most Western economies aim on average for an inflation rate of 2%. This means that if inflation is higher than 2%, central banks can increase interest rates, in turn making it more expensive to borrow money, which in turn reduces the demand for items, which stops prices rising at the rate they were. So as mentioned before, why would countries aim to have inflation at all? Well, low and controlled levels of inflation can have positive impacts on growing a country's economy. If people believe that prices today will be less than prices in the future, then people will be happy to spend money today, which will boost the economy and keep it growing. If we had an environment where prices were decreasing, known as deflation, people would not spend money today in the knowledge that things will become cheaper in the future. This has a negative impact on the country's economy, stopping it growing and therefore not being able to invest money into public services such as education and healthcare. So other than increasing the costs of goods and decreasing the value of money, how else does inflation affect you? Well, the answer is it affects all aspects of your financial life. Let's look at pay rises to begin with. If you are given a pay rise of 3% and annual inflation is currently 1.5%, we see that in what we call real terms, the pay increase is actually only 1.5%. This is because the value of your money is decreasing at 3% a year. We then calculate the difference between the pay rise and the rate of inflation, and that gives us the rate of pay increase in real terms. Another area people will see inflation affect them is with interest earned in a bank account. If, for example, you earn 1.5% interest on the money sat in your bank account and inflation is at 2.5%, your money sat in the bank will be losing 1% of its value every year. That is why it is important to understand what inflation is and how it affects your money. Conversely to this, inflation can have an impact on any debt you have. For example, if the interest rate you are paying on debt is less than the rate of inflation, your debt technically becomes cheaper over time due to the weakening currency. This occurs because you will be paying back less than the item you bought has increased in cost over the period of the loan or credit. So, what can you do to protect yourself and your money against inflation? The only real way to successfully achieve this is to receive more income on your money than the rate of inflation. This can be through a higher interest rate on a bank account or through getting a higher return on investments than inflation. This could be a high interest bank account or an ISA. It could also be achieved from investing in shares, provided that your return on investment is higher than inflation. There is always the risk that you can lose money from investing in shares. We will look at these in future videos. The main point to take away from this video is that you understand what inflation is and how it affects you in your day-to-day life. There are many concepts in finance, and it can seem confusing to even start to understand. But if you start with the most common areas, it will make it easier to piece together the system and allow you the power to make your own informed financial decisions.